Okay, so the time has come to review season 2 of The Summer Turned Pretty. I could honestly make multiple videos about this, and I might, dependent on the reception, I guess. Today in this video, I'm going to be going through a lot of the comments that I got on each of my videos, and just responding, replying, that type of thing, and also just a general review and thoughts that were spurred on by that. So that's kind of responding to your comments, doing a review, little analysis, little opinion. I definitely, it's funny because like the last episode I didn't really give an opinion on in depth other than like that I was like, this is so bad, this is terrible, why would they do this? So I'll go a little bit more into depth on that today, but let's start. And I'm not gonna say people's names, like usernames, because I don't want anybody to like get hate or anything like that. Like I don't want drama, so I just, if you commented whatever I read, you know you commented it. And thank you for commenting, even if it's something that I disagree with. Let's see. Okay, so one comment from the first video. I think you may be misremembering Jeremiah shooting that firework surprisingly didn't sabotage anything and had nothing to do with Belly and Jeremiah briefly getting together at all. If you actually think about it, whether Conrad and Belly kissed or not, the results are the same. The reason they didn't end up together had everything to do with the conversation that Conrad had with her mother's writing friend. Okay, so sure. I mean, I get that. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it's, you know, it's kind of impossible to know, regardless, like, what would have happened had the kiss not been interrupted. Like, it could have been the starting point of their relationship. I don't know, having that actual kiss could have changed Conrad's mind about things. Like, at the end of the season, I mean, they had that kiss and he was ready to get into a relationship, or so he said. Or he jumped into the relationship regardless of whether he was ready or not. So, who knows what that kiss could have changed. It could have been the beginning of their relationship, and it also could have affected nothing at the same time. But you also don't really know how it would have affected Belly, because had Belly actually kissed Conrad and gone through with that, there's no telling whether, like, she would be as willing to hook up with Jeremiah. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, you have a point there, but it's kind of like a thing of you just don't really know. But more of, like, my point of Jeremiah shooting the firework in the first place was talking about how he knew what was going on. Like, he knew that Belly liked Conrad, everyone did, and now he's seeing that Conrad reciprocates, and he's trying to make that not happen. And I'll talk about it more, but, like, there's multiple instances of him interfering in that, and later, I think the next episode, he's, like, telling Nicole to ask Conrad to Coachella, and he's really trying to interfere and trying to separate them so he can get his foot in the door, which is fine. Well, I mean, that's just what he's doing. So again, that was just kind of looking at a pattern of behavior, and the way that things played out in the first season, and why I attribute a lot of it to Jeremiah rather than Belly. But the second season, I mean, it's a whole other story. Okay. I'm sorry, but this was hard to watch. Like, half of everything that happened was Belly's fault, and I get she was sad or whatever. Like, I get liking her character and supporting her, but you literally have to admit when she's wrong. She ain't perfect. She also treated Laurel so bad. Like, Laurel was helping Susanna with cancer, and she expected her to go to her games. Like, what? Make it make sense. I get her being with Conrad since she's been in love with him, but she needs to stop playing or using other boys as a distraction like Cam and Jeremiah. When she does it, nobody cares, and when they do it, it's manipulative. Like, she needs to realize everything she's doing affects everyone else and pull herself together. You can't defend her for everything. So, a lot there. Yes, I agree. Like, she doesn't need to be using these boys as a distraction. Belly needs to be, like, alone. Belly needs to do some work, okay? She shouldn't be using any boys as a distraction. Certainly not the love of her life's brother. So I never said that was wise. I never said that was a good choice on Belly's part. More so, in the first episode, everyone was just being so hard on her, and I touched on this a little bit, I think, later, but I'll go more into depth, because, like, the thing is that Belly was just people were just giving Belly such a hard time in the first episode, and it was so kind of unwarranted, because, yes, she made mistakes, but, like, everyone made mistakes, and everything is complicated and confused and weird, and, you know, Conrad and Jeremiah's relationship with Steven is completely independent of their relationship with Belly. Of course, it's intertwined, and it gets complicated and messy, but it's still their prerogative and their responsibility to keep up a relationship with Steven, and that's their fault that they didn't do that. You can't attribute that to Belly. Belly's not the one who did that, right? These are, you know, like, grown people, you know, they're still kids, but, you know, they're teenagers. Like, it's like, you know, you make your own decisions about friends no matter what. And I've had friends and love interests be intertwined in a similar fashion, and I never let that influence my relationship with my friend. Do you know what I mean? So you can do that. And you can also not do that. Like, who knows? It might just be that, like, reminding them of Belly and Laurel or Susanna is too much. Like, who knows? Their mom was dying. So, like, you can't really know what they were going through and why the reason is they weren't talking to Steven. There could be a million reasons. So I don't think it was fair for Steven to say that was her fault at all, because their relationship is separate from Belly's relationship with them and that drama. And it's their responsibility to maintain that relationship if they want to maintain that relationship. And if they don't, it's nobody else's fault but theirs. And that's another thing, you know, her calling out Laurel, it's a very interesting thing, because Laurel hasn't been there for Belly or Steven, and that's reaffirmed multiple times throughout the season and started in this episode, the very first episode. It was very obvious. Belly's already kind of very worried about her. She's obviously really struggling. She's not eating. She's not going out. She's not doing her work. You know what I mean? Like, she's in a bad way. And I'm not making any commentary on that whatsoever, because of course she's in a bad way. Like, her best friend just died. So it's not that she's wrong to be going through that or having those emotions, but that also doesn't make Belly wrong to point out that the impact that it's made on her has been detrimental. To not have her mom, to be going through it already, and then to have her mom be sort of like absent. The volleyball thing, I don't think it's about Belly expecting Laurel to go to her volleyball games. It's more about that now that Laurel is lecturing her on this volleyball match and this volleyball position, where it's like, okay, in the grand scheme of things, volleyball is so insignificant in comparison to the grief and the trauma that they're going through, that it really shouldn't be the type of thing that people are harping on or giving Belly a hard time about. But her mom decided to do that, and it's very hypocritical, especially because it's like, well, you've never shown any interest in this before. Like, you haven't even been to one of my games, so how are you telling me what to do with volleyball, and how are you telling me all these things about volleyball when you, like, it hasn't been a thing. So more so, Belly was pointing out the hypocrisy that Laurel was kind of facilitating. And nobody else, the reason I was defending Belly is because nobody else was doing that to anyone else. Any of the times that Belly retaliated was literally in direct response to people coming at her. Oh, I think there's also a very, like, interesting point to be made for the gender dynamics. Like, for sure. I mean, if the roles were reversed and it was a guy at the center of two girls, like, who knows how different it would be. It's really kind of hard to even get into that, but I've never not acknowledged, or maybe not verbally, but I've never not, you know, in my own head, like, acknowledged that, yes, it is a different dynamic. And that's just bound to happen with, you know, genders. Like, that's just bound to happen. So I wrote a long response to this person, and then they were like, I'm not reading all that, which, you know, free country. But part of what I said, but if Laurel's gonna lecture Belly about how she's dealt with her grief, it's completely valid of Belly to point out in response how hypocritical that judgment is, given that everyone, including Laurel, is falling short in certain ways due to the situation. It's completely understandable if Laurel hasn't been as president, but I think my point was more that everyone seemed to be lashing out at Belly when they were also struggling themselves. So the hypocrisy there really kind of bothered me, and it's not really a matter of anyone being in the right or in the wrong, but Belly's frustration with her mom not eating, not promoting her book, and being gone a ton is completely valid. Just as it's valid for Laurel to not be eating, not promoting her book, not being around a ton. Do you know what I mean? So it wasn't really a placing of blame, but it was just more of an acknowledgement that people were being a little unfair to Belly in the grand scheme of things, because all of them were really struggling and really going through it. Another thing I just want to, you know, like, put out there, love triangles, I don't love them. I don't think they're a good plot device. I don't think they ever work, except for a couple exceptions where love triangles were done spectacularly, but all the other ones, it's like, it's just so stupid. You know what I mean? Like, and again, like, no offense to anybody who are team the second guy, but Twilight, it's obvious she's gonna be with Edward, right? Like, to all the boys I loved before, it's obvious she's gonna be with Peter. So, like, you know what I mean? Like, these second love interests that are brought in, it's just kind of pointless, because it's like, well, this is what's happening. And a lot of times they do it in a way where it's like, they bring in the second love interest after you've already established this relationship with the first love interest, and they don't even really get a chance to have a relationship. Like, it's just always messy and, like, never works. The only times that has worked, for me, at least in my opinion, has been Skins, the love triangle between Freddie, Effie, and Cook. If you haven't watched Skins, watch Skins. Okay, I can't recommend it. Honestly, if anybody wanted to, even though I've watched it a million times, but, like, if anyone wanted to see my reaction to that, oh my god, I would live to do a Skins commentary. I would live to do a Glee commentary. I would live to do any of the things that, like, I've been obsessed with forever commentaries on. I just know that, like, sometimes people don't like to watch reactions that aren't first time reactions, so just, I don't know, let me know if that's something you'd be open to, or would want, because I would eat that down. But but yeah, no, that worked because, like, and even then, it was very obvious that, I won't spoil anything, but it was very obvious that one ship was kind of going to be the ship. But the way that they did it was a way of, like, they really fleshed out both relationships and made them separate from each other. They had one relationship, it ended, and then it was like, flesh out this relationship. Some of it overlapped, and some of it was, you know, very love triangle classic. But they really kind of individualized both of those relationships, developed them, fleshed them out, so that you could see both, you could root for both, and you could see that, like, the main person really did love both of them, just kind of in different ways, which a lot of times I don't know that, like, at least me personally, I'm convinced that a love interest is really, like, really into both of these people. Again, I'm like, girl, Jacob, like, I don't know that she was into him. Like, I just don't know that. I just don't think that. Belly, I just have a really hard time believing that. And I'm going to also acknowledge that some of this might be just me interposing my own personal experience in life over this, and I think we all need to acknowledge that, like, a lot of us are doing that, right? So, like, people's preference for Jeremiah or Conrad does have a lot to do with their own personal preferences. Like, Conrad is the type of guy, his personality is more suited to me, is more appealing to me, is the type of person that I would want to date versus Jeremiah. And I think a lot of people, it's the opposite. So, you know, you can, like, say it's a question of, oh, who's better for Belly, but a lot of times it's like, well, your preference is already leaning towards, like, the person that you yourself would probably choose. You know what I mean? And we need to, like, acknowledge that. Like, let's be real. Let's be real, okay? Let's be real. Oh, but it was so good in Skins because I would have been happy with either of the final couples, and I also simultaneously would have been sad for the other couple that didn't make it. You know what I mean? Like I was in support of all of those relationships. I liked both of them, which is very rare. I don't think it's easy to do that successfully at all. And I mean, to be completely honest, I don't think they're doing it successfully here. At least to me, I'm like, you're not convincing me. It's just you're not convincing me. You know what I mean? Like you're not doing a good job of making me really question which side and that type of stuff. And love triangles are just like, and I really wish it was just like they changed it to be with someone else if they were going to do a love triangle, because it's just so messy when it's with family members. But alas, they want the drama, so I guess that's fine. What was the other love triangle I was thinking of? Well, and the thing that's interesting, I have kind of a philosophy about this, like, and tell me, if you're Team Jeremiah, were you Team Jacob? Because it seems to be like an overarching thing. To me, I've never, in a love triangle situation, there have been ships that I have shipped that were not in game. R.I.P. But in a love triangle situation, the ship that I have always like chosen to be a part of the team has always been the one that is in game. And so I just find it interesting because like I don't know what the feeling is like to like love a ship so much that isn't in game or that like another ship gets picked over. But I also just wonder about the through line of that because I think there might be some overlap. Do you know what I mean? Like, let me know if anybody like has a pattern of, if you are Team Jeremiah, if you have a pattern of like really liking ships that end up not being in game. Because I just think that's kind of like an interesting thing. So I'll go to the episode 2 comments. So it's a good thing you're praising Belly because she gets so much backlash, not even just from other characters in the show, but from viewers too. And a lot of female characters in series involving a love triangle, etc., are held to different standards and judged more harshly than the male leads, for sure. And so it's very interesting because while some of the behavior might have a double standard based on gender, like also the treatment of female lead characters, I think in some ways is going to be more destructive. And I'll wrap that back into like the end, but they're doing a good job of making Belly unlikable and making her the like sole perpetrator of everything that's wrong in this love triangle, which I find very interesting. And we'll get into it. Okay, very much agree with what you said. I feel like there's a lot of people who don't understand that you can feel bad for someone and not agree with their actions at the same time. For example, I don't necessarily like a lot of Jeremiah's actions, nor my Team Jeremiah, but I really do feel bad for him sometimes, and that goes for many characters in the show. For sure, I think this show is good at doing that. Like, it's good at getting people's perspectives across. I don't dislike anybody in the show at all. But I also, don't agree with, certain things, but I'm still, like, empathetic of their situation. And I think the show is good at doing that and having that dynamic be set up. So yeah, I mean, it's not like I really condone like every action that every single, and that goes for Conrad too. Like, I know that maybe comparatively speaking, I harp on Jeremiah's flaws more. And that also is a personal preference because the things that Jeremiah's doing are personally to me more kind of like offensive, I guess, than the things that Conrad's doing. Because that's my personality. Like, that's the way that I view things. If I was in this situation, I would be more offended by the things that Jeremiah's doing versus the things that Conrad's doing. So I'm not trying to say that Conrad's good and Jeremiah's evil or Conrad's perfect and Jeremiah has all these flaws. And I'll try and get to that because Conrad does have issues and does have flaws for sure. I've never not, acknowledged that. But I think it's kind of a personal preference thing. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, no, but everyone in the show has, like, faults and flaws, for sure. But yeah, no, I don't agree with every action that any of these characters do. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's people can view it in such a black and white way, especially, I guess, when the rhetoric is, like, Team Conrad versus Team Jeremiah. It, like, implies that you're all in on this one person and hate this other person, and that's not really the case, at least for me personally. It's a lot more, like, nuanced than that. Okay, so Belly needed someone to come for her. She needs to be humbled. I'm sorry, but Belly was the start of everything. Mostly was her fault in season 1, but she low-key played Jer for real. So I disagree on this, and it's okay. We can have disagreements, everyone. Let's be nice. Like, it's not, the end of the world. But I just find it very interesting because Jer, like, he willingly enters into the situation, knowing full well what he's getting himself into. He's known about Belly his entire life, right? Now he's seen evidence that Conrad actually reciprocates those feelings. So he goes into his pursuing of Belly fully aware that both of them like each other and low-key want to be together. Which, to me, I'm like, a lot of the hurt that ends up ensuing was inevitable, and he knew that going into it. So it's hard for me to feel, like, totally bad, because it wasn't like he was totally blindsided or anything like that. And yes, Belly should have shut him down. Yes, Belly shouldn't have hooked up with him and, given him hope or something like that. But, like, Jared knew what he was doing when he got into this and when he started pursuing Belly in the first place. So his, like, shock and outrage at Belly and Conrad being together is a little unwarranted, in my opinion. Like, it's like, girl, you knew what you were getting into. And that's another thing, a difference between Jeremiah and Conrad. Like, Conrad didn't have any idea that Jeremiah had these feelings at all at the beginning. Like, he finds that out, and he's then, like, questioning things, and he's like, wait, do you want to be together? And we'll get to that. So, again, like, a lot of it, I kind of, for the first season, I attribute to Jer because he knew what he was getting himself into, and he did it anyway. Which, like, it's not wrong to, like, confess your feelings to someone and see what happens, and it, you know, it is up to them whatever they do in response. So I'm not saying that Belly has no responsibility in how messy things got in the first season, but Jer was a little bit of kind of like a mastermind there, where he kind of saw all these moving pieces and still went ahead and did this thing that then ended up getting him hurt, that he knew could possibly get him hurt, for sure. But the thing is, it's like, I think he just wanted it to go his way. And he, I guess, wasn't thinking about the fact that, like, if it didn't go his way, then it would be very hurtful and painful to him. I think he just thought, like, maybe if I can sick Nicole on Conrad, I can distract her long enough and treat Belly well enough that, you know, she'll fall in love with me and forget about Conrad, which just isn't that realistic. And again, he's a teenage boy. And again, I want to say for all these characters, most of them, they're fucking teenagers. So it's like, girl, how much can you, like, really blame them? Like, they're kids. Their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet. Okay, so, like, it's their decision making, like, especially with the situations that they're in, it's kind of hard to, like, really put blame on anyone in particular. But if we're just looking kind of, like, objectively at actions, then in this case, I do think, like, Jer kind of kicked himself in the foot, brought about his own downfall in that way. Do you know what I mean? By thinking, like, he could change Belly, like, and Conrad's love for each other, I guess. You know what I mean? Belly could have said no, but the shock is confusing given how easily he willingly and knowledgeably entered into the situation, specifically. So episode 3 comment: because of how soon the funeral was after the prom breakup, it's very possible Conrad knew his mom didn't have very long left and he couldn't put on a happy face. So true, bestie. So extenuating circumstances, plus within the grand scheme of, like, bad treatment and behavior, his offense is not that great. I don't know why people act like Conrad treats Belly so badly, especially when, like, I guess this season, what you have to point to is the prom breakup. Like, his mom was literally about to die. You know what I mean? So, like, him not being totally there is not him being a terrible person. It's just a byproduct of the extenuating specific circumstance that they are in. He wasn't mean to her. He wasn't, like, overly miserable and making her miserable in a way, like, of, like, this sucks and, like, that type of stuff. Like, it was just obvious that he was hurting and struggling, and he kept to himself, and he was more detached and internalized. But all of that is really understandable behavior given what's going on. So I don't think it says anything about Conrad's character. I don't think it says anything about his treatment of Belly in the grand scheme of things. And I don't know why people try and act like it does. Yes, being there for a spouse is important in those special moments, and it's not as if Belly wasn't also struggling and hurting, and he should have let her in. You know, he didn't need to shut her out. But again, it's like, can you really fault him? Like, his mom's fucking dying. You know what I mean? Like, it's just such a confusing thing, and his intent is trying to do the best for Belly. He's like, you need someone that could be there for you, and I can't right now. I literally cannot be there for you. I cannot support you in this right now, because I'm just too messed up. And so he thought it was an act of, like, mercy, letting her go, that type of thing. Which there can be discourse had on, like, men, especially in fictional romantic situations at least, you know, being like, I know what's best, so I'm gonna make the decision for you, and it's like, okay, girl. But again, I think the circumstance is really important to keep in mind of, like, what was going on. It's also different, it's different because, like, Belly's hurting, obviously, but it's his mom, like, his real mom, his actual mom. You know, at the end of this, Belly loses a mother figure, yes, but she will still have her mom. It doesn't mean it's not excruciating for her. It doesn't mean it's not heartbreaking and hard and trauma and grief for her, but it is a little bit different than having, like, your actual mother die. So, and that's the position that Conrad's in. Plus, you know, while prom, especially for this time period, is an important and big deal, in the grand scheme of things, in comparison to fucking dying from cancer, girl, give me a break. Like, he's really supposed to be, like, prioritizing, you know, fucking an after party, an after prom, like, over, like, he's like, my mom is literally dying at home. You know what I mean? Like, be for fucking real. Let's, you know, weigh the options here. Like, let's be real, okay? Yeah, so also, this is interesting because some of his mental illness issues and obstacles are on display here, but it shows a deep care for Belly, but it also shows his issues with self-esteem and worth, his overthinking, his sacrificial behavior for the benefit of others. These are things he needs to work on in order for him to be a better person individually and to be a better partner in a relationship, to have a healthy relationship, for sure. It isn't, you know, the most fair to a partnership or a relationship, a partner. But to me, it's more sad than infuriating, but also hard to tell because of the circumstance. Like, who knows how he would have acted had the circumstance not been so dire. And, like, since it's so extreme, iffy behavior is to be expected. It's just part of it. It just goes along with it. But yeah, those are things he definitely needs to work on. Like, he has issues with self-esteem and self-worth. He has issues with not communicating with other people about their needs. He has issues with being self-sacrificial in his mind, which is all like good intention, but it's not, the results are still not good. So he needs to work on that for sure. And it showed that, but it doesn't to me it shows issues that Conrad has, sure, shades of that, but it doesn't show him treating her really, really badly. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that's what that is. Okay, so this is about the funeral. That's why she ran downstairs. She didn't want to freak out, but him going downstairs caused that. When someone leaves after they look like they're about to explode with anger, let them be. Going after them is going to make it worse, and this scene just entirely proves that. Also, this scene is a little deja vu moment with Belly and Susanna in season 1 when Susanna falls and Adam tries to help her. So true. I hated both of those moments so much. Oh my god, I still, oh my god. Yeah, so that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. There's definitely a larger debate to be had about the best things to do in those situations, and it definitely, like, giving space versus chasing after someone in these types of situations. But the thing is, it definitely just depends on each individual person and each individual relationship, so you can't really say, like, objectively that it's the wrong or right thing to do. Maybe in that situation for that person, it was the wrong thing to do in that moment. But it's an interesting debate, right? Like, should he have followed after her? It makes sense why he did, because he wanted to disabuse her of the notion that this was romantic, because it wasn't. It makes sense why Belly walked away from it, because she didn't want to have a whole scene and she wanted to get away from it, and then that was made difficult by Conrad following after her. But again, the smart thing at that point, and again, I think this is more immaturity than anything else that it shows from both of them, but particularly Belly, where it's like the smart thing to do at that point, after he had already followed her out, is to take it outside, at the very least. Like, to say either, we need to do this later, not today, like, I'm not having this conversation right now, that type of thing, to try and be, I guess, rescheduling it, and be like, okay, we'll talk about this another time, or just not wanting to talk about it at all, I guess, in that moment. No, the smart thing to do at that point would be to take the argument outside, walk away, verbalize that you need, like, time and space to cool down, but emotions are high, and they're teenagers, so they can't be expected to do the most mature or healthy thing in that moment, especially, which is later acknowledged and apologized for, which I loved. And that is one of my favorite moments of the season, and it is a positive moment for Belly of growth and introspection and maturation. But even so, Conrad doesn't even hold her responsible, and he's always thinking about how he contributed and blames himself while also validating her feelings, and you see that in their conversation, which I might go, like, episode by episode and kind of break down things like that to talk about, but it's very interesting. Some of these things I have already written down, some of them I'm just, like, going, so... Yeah, so people might not necessarily be realistically expected to understand Conrad because he is so internalized and doesn't verbalize a lot of his issues and feelings and thoughts and what he's going through. And the thing is, I'm not saying it's other people's job to do guesswork on Conrad, to try and figure out what's going on, to be like putting in all this extra effort and time and energy into figuring out what he won't communicate. Like, that is nobody's responsibility to do in a relationship. That's on Conrad. The onus is on him to communicate those things, because nobody else, unless you verbalize that, unless you communicate that, there's no way that other people can be expected to know. And they shouldn't be held accountable for not knowing. Do you know what I mean? Because you didn't tell them. Especially since there is a chance that, like, it could be him basically being a fuckboy and just, like, leading Belly on and just fucking around. We know that it's not that, but it easily could be, especially without the context that we have of seeing things from Conrad's point of view. All the other people in this are doing guesswork about Conrad, so it's not unrealistic for Belly to be, like, wondering about the sincerity of some of these things, especially since they're teenagers. Like, it's a teenage boy. And the thing is, even if he was fucking around, like, just generally speaking, that doesn't necessarily make him a bad guy. It just is messy. You know what I mean? Like, I have a similar situation with someone where, like, I don't know how much I should say, but, he did something that was, like, really kind of crazy. And I was like, are you, like, trying to be shitty? Or, like, do you not even just realize what you're doing? Like, what? I was so confused and trying to understand what it was that he was doing. I was like, are you intentionally doing this, like, to hurt me and others? Or are you just, like, oblivious to the fact that you're hurting others? Are you just stupid? Are you just immature? Like, what is going on? So it's hard to tell, especially at that age. Yeah, so it's frustrating to see these negative stereotypes and assumptions forced upon him, especially because we know more and are more informed that it's, like, it's not like that. But it's really, like, heartbreaking and frustrating to me to see everyone always assuming the worst and not giving him the benefit of the doubt, especially because it's like, no, for real, he's not, he deserves the benefit of the doubt in these situations. Like, he's not what all these people are thinking of. Like, Belly and Jeremiah in particular are really assuming the worst of him in a lot of these situations, which I don't know if that's completely fair to him as a person or in their relationships to him, given what has actually gone down. But there's a lot of baggage there. There's a lot of mixed emotions with both of those relationships. So I guess it kind of makes sense. There is a self-preservation element from both of their perspectives about Conrad that has nothing to do with Conrad himself or his actions, but just situationally where they're all placed. So Belly is valid in some of her fears and being fed up with feeling discarded, for sure. But I think that, like, with how much she supposedly loves him, she would put more effort into understanding him. But then again, it might just be that he's made it really impossible to. I think in the book, he was a lot more emotionally withholding. It makes a lot more sense. Belly's confusion, Belly's hesitance, Belly's delusion, like all of Belly's kind of missteps in the love triangle make a lot more sense in the books because Conrad is very withholding. He doesn't express his feelings. He is very confusing. He's very unclear. He's a lot more clear in the show, I think, at least. So again, that places hate onto Belly because it's like he's told you how he feels. Like, it's obvious how he feels, and you're still doing this to him. Yeah, so also the godlike status she's put on him also places her inevitably below him, but especially after they've been in a relationship together and she's finally seen a more realistic side of him that's not clouded by idolization or putting him up on a pedestal, even though the impression that she has of him as a person is definitely clouded by his grief and his trauma in this moment, right? So, like, he's not fully himself in this moment because he's going through such extraordinary circumstances. But regardless, she did get to know him better because she got to know a more real side of him versus like the idea and image of who he was. So you'd think that she would have more compassion, especially because she said she knows at the end Conrad loved her. Which again, I think they're trying to make it a thing of like, no, it's not that she chose Jeremiah because Conrad didn't work out. They're trying to individualize it and make it like, no, she chose Jeremiah over Conrad in this time, which in order to do that, you need to have her know fully about both of their feelings and like have that be expressed to her. So that's why they had Conrad do that and had her acknowledge, be like, no, I believe that you love me. But it just, again, it makes Belly very villainous. You know what I mean? Like, it makes her seem really bad. It's really setting her up. So I don't know. It's complicated. This might have been better to keep as her believing that he doesn't love her and that he never did and never could, in order to make more sense of that and to have everyone, I guess, be in a better place at the end, I think, at least. But, you know, but alas. Okay, so episode 4. I agree with everything you said. Jeremiah isn't a bad person. However, he does put himself in constant competition with Conrad. That's just something siblings do. I do believe he loves Belly. She's his best friend, but a part of him wants her just to finally win over Conrad, to be someone's choice over his brother. While Jeremiah always tries to be better than his older brother, Conrad tries his best to take care of him and not hurt him. He often blames himself for things out of his control. So true. Unfortunately for Jeremiah, Conrad is just the better option for Belly. Their connection is like no other. They're deeply in love, and they'll never really get over each other. Completely agree with all of that. And I said a bunch, like, Jeremiah's not evil at all. He's a teenage kid with faults and flaws like every other person on the planet. But he does have misplaced resentment and anger toward Conrad, and I talked about that in the episode 4 video. The competition and comparison between them was something that was structurally set up by his dad and by his family dynamic, and then reaffirmed by certain experiences in life later on in social situations. But Conrad himself has never been competitive with Jeremiah. He's never contributed to the idea that he's better than Jeremiah or Jeremiah's below him. I don't think he even thinks of them at all in comparison or competition whatsoever. But Jeremiah has an inferiority complex, and he blames Conrad for it, even though he has nothing to do with it. You know, Conrad is not the person to be blaming for these feelings. Society, situations, perceptions of masculinity, his dad, his family situation, like, all of those things are to be blamed. Conrad is not, but Jeremiah has this misplaced anger on Conrad, even though Conrad has never contributed to this dynamic, or really, like, participated in competition with him, I guess maybe until the very end of this season when he was, like, really fed up. But up until that point, like, it's obvious that he just doesn't see it that way, but Jared definitely does. He doesn't stoke or participate in competition much, which I think Jeremiah also misinterprets as him thinking that he's, like, above it and above everything. So again, but everything, it's kind of like an echo chamber, and it's kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy. Jeremiah just has these ideas and beliefs about Conrad, who he is, and how he is, that almost everything, regardless of what Conrad does, whether it's good, bad, like, doesn't matter. It will be reaffirming in some way or another the perception that Jeremiah has of him. So even when Conrad's doing something nice, Jeremiah can see it in a way that's shaded to be like, oh, you're being manipulative, or oh, you're making fun of me, like that type of thing, because he's just kind of like set on his perspective of Conrad at this point, and nothing seems to be capable of changing it, which is an issue. Yeah, so some of his frustration with Conrad is valid. Like, it sucks to have secrets kept from you, and have someone, you know, managing information and to be thinking that you can't handle it, so they keep it from you. And I'm a younger sibling, so, like, from that perspective, completely get it. Like, it would be fucking infuriating if my sister was, like, keeping shit from me because she's like, you can't handle it. Like, I'm the oldest. Like, I'd be like, shut the fuck up, bitch. So, like, that is completely valid, that frustration. But I also struggle because I'm like, well, it's very obviously from a good place, though. Like, and maybe it's just because we see Conrad's perspective on that it's, you know, hard to know whether Jeremiah would even be able to tell that. But again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because like Jeremiah sees Conrad doing that and he's like, oh, he thinks I'm immature and dumb and stupid and can't handle it. Versus what it actually is, which is like, I want to protect him. I don't want him to have to go through this. I'll just do it instead so he doesn't have to. You know what I mean? So that again, it's kind of just whatever Conrad does, it will be fulfilling that idea and image that Jeremiah already has of him that's negative. But it shows the family dynamics and positions being so far entrenched in their relationship and then as people because Conrad feels these responsibilities, pressures, and power as the oldest. Everything that has been like put on him as the oldest, he's had to deal with and had to take on. So it's not so much that Jer isn't capable, but just that this has always been like Conrad's purpose, his position, his responsibility in life. And so he takes it on. But again, like Jeremiah's not really, I guess, seeing that. I mean, to be fair, neither of them are really seeing the full picture of their relationship and the flaws in it and the dynamics at play for sure. Like neither of them are really aware of it at all. But, you know, luckily we as an audience can see. Okay, so I think you're right about the Jeremiah and Conrad dynamic. I enjoy watching the show as a grown-ass adult with my own kids because I always go back to how dumb you were at 16, 17, 18. Think about how many stupid mistakes you made and the people you hurt unintentionally. How massive those emotions are. Imagine adding grief and maybe first grief to that. I think the triumph of the story is that everyone is right and wrong, especially Susanna, which I'm sorry to those who don't want to hear that, but it's true. She kept the first secrets that caused the ripple effects of everyone else's problems. She hurt her sons by keeping the secret, and it was immature and selfish. Conrad trying to protect everyone by keeping it in makes sense for his maturity level, but Susanna's responsibility as the adult is to do better. Now, I think this is good because it proves Susanna was human, which I foresee the show touching on too, but I can't at this point help still feeling like Jer's scheming in the first season felt gross to me. That's why I'm ultimately Team Conrad because of all his intentions were pure, and I worry that Jer's weren't. Also, the chemistry with Lola and Chris is just far better. Excited to see if that could change even a little in the second half of the season. In my opinion, it didn't, but you know, we all have different opinions. Like, it's very kind of fascinating to me because like, again, I watch it and I'm like, they so obviously have better chemistry. And then I see a lot of people being like, Gavin and Lola obviously have so much better chemistry. And I'm like, I don't get it. But, you know, people don't get when I say, like, Chris and Lola have better chemistry. It's just a very interesting thing. I guess it really is, like, influenced by your own personality, your own life, your own perceptions, your own understanding of love and relationships. Maybe. That's where the differences come in. But yeah, read episode 1. Like, everyone is right and wrong. Susanna keeping that secret was selfish. Though understandable. So, like, again, a lot of these actions are just kind of, like, gray. It's kind of a gray area, because it's, like, it's completely understandable why she wanted to keep that secret and why she did. It is technically selfish, though. But just because someone does something for what is traditionally perceived as a negative reason doesn't make them a bad person, and is often completely justified based on the circumstances in the show, in particular. Not everyone can always be doing what is objectively the best and most ethical/moral thing for every single person. So again, me pointing out, like, Susanna's secret was selfish is not me casting a negative pall on her at all, or even the actions. It's just that people are complex, they're right and wrong, good and bad, all of the above. It's much more nuanced than I think a lot of people give it kind of credit for. And even I think kind of love triangles contribute to this dynamic of, like, just, abandoning nuance altogether. It's like, this one's good, this one's bad, this one sucks, this one's amazing, you know, that type of thing. Yeah, Susanna was not perfect, and I'm really glad that they touched on that in this season, and they did go into it with Julia, which I knew they were going to do, and I lived for that, loved that. You can see the ripple effect of her imperfection in the imperfections of both of her sons, right? There's a reason why both Conrad and Jeremiah have these issues that they do and this trauma that they do, and it is not solely because of Adam. There are things that Susanna definitely contributed to this, as every single parent does. It doesn't mean that she's a bad parent, it doesn't mean anything about her as a person or parents. It's just the way that things are. She definitely contributed to some of the issues that they have, for sure. And not just her being sick either, which is in and of itself something that definitely they can attribute a lot of their issues to. You know, like, you think of, so the debutante ball, like, pressuring Belly to do that, pressure on Conrad, pressure on Conrad, you know, pushing an agenda of, like, Belly ending up with one of her sons. Like, these are all things that, again, are very harmless in their intent, but might have had lasting impacts that were negative, even if they were not intended to be. Okay, so also this brought up kind of some opinions about just, like, and reflection on differences between Conrad and Jared, maybe why I am partial to Conrad. I think they both do a lot that's not good, but the reason why I'm partial to Conrad a lot of the time is, even if his actions are good, his intentions are. I don't know how often Jared's intentions are quite as, I guess, noble or generous or empathetic to others as Conrad's are. A lot of Conrad's decisions come from a place of wanting the best for other people, whereas Jared's often feel immature and selfish. And this brought up an interesting thing. I really think there might be something to this where Jared grew up feeling like nobody gave a fuck about him and nobody gave a fuck about his feelings and nobody prioritized him. Nobody even like thought about him. Like he was just such an afterthought. So like in current day, the dynamic now is that he is really kind of prioritizing himself, which there isn't necessarily anything wrong with that. It just, there could be a better balance. But like maybe the fact that he grew up feeling like nobody ever gave a fuck about his feelings and he easily gets triggered and struggles to care for others when he feels the instinctive need to prioritize and protect himself. Like maybe that's really kind of where it's coming from. Because to be honest, like a lot of his decisions are what's best for me? What do I want? What can get me what I want? Whereas I think he thinks a lot less about the other people involved in the situation and their emotions and their feelings than Conrad does. But again, that is reinforcing their dynamic. Like Conrad is very much older brother syndrome, you know, he's the protector, he's forced to think about everyone else, he has the pressure bearing down on his shoulders of like the weight of actions on everybody else and he has to take care of everyone. So he's very cognizant of other people's emotions and what people are going through and has that internalized pressure of taking care of it. Whereas Jer has felt so neglected for so long about, you know, his feelings and his hopes and dreams, like everything. Like he, as the second son, you know, and Conrad is kind of like the golden boy. That dynamic kind of puts him in a position where it's like he isn't being prioritized, or at least the way that he sees it, he isn't being prioritized, and so he gets easily triggered by that same feeling happening again, and he finds it like difficult to give a fuck about other people and their struggles because nobody ever gave a fuck about his. If that makes sense, like he needs to now, and again, that doesn't make him a bad person. It's just a pattern of like behavior that I recognize. I'm just trying to hypothesize about where that could come from. And it's very interesting because I can, you know, that phenomenon of like feeling so fed up with being treated badly that you become your own, you know, protector and your own kind of warrior where you're like, nobody gave a fuck about me growing up. Like, I need to give a fuck about me. I need to give a fuck about my feelings because nobody else is going to. So like that might be where a lot of Jer's inspiration is coming from to do the things that he does, is self-involved and self-centered just based off of kind of the trauma that he has from growing up in the way that he did. And he's so kind of wounded by that he needs to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so he tries his best, you know what I mean? Yeah, like Jer's scheming in the first season especially, like this person said it felt gross. Like to me, it does feel a little gross. I can't lie, like it does. It's manipulative, like that's what it is. It's just he's manipulating the situations that he's, you know, pulling strings, that he's trying to make things happen and make things go his way. Which again might not be totally unjustified in the grand scheme of like him as a person and what he went through as a kid. And they might not have been nefarious like in his own mind, right? Like he didn't, I don't know that like, there's so many people that don't understand why they do the things that they do, right? So like, it's not that he's even cognizant of the fact that he's doing these things, that he's maybe not thinking about others as much as maybe he should be or could be. It's not like a nefarious thing of like, I'm gonna do whatever I want and everyone else can fucking, you know, suck it. Like, it's not that. I just bet he's not even aware that he's really doing it. But similar to Belly, regardless of the justifications for the actions themselves are often fucked up. You know what I mean? Like, objectively speaking, like, if you were to take away all kind of, it's like, oh, that's kind of messed up. You know what I mean? And Conrad can cause pain and hurt to other people, and he does. Okay, like, again, I'm not trying to say that Conrad doesn't cause other people pain or isn't, his issues aren't having harmful effects on other people. All of them do. All of their issues are harmful to other people because that's the way that it is. Jeremiah, Belly, and Conrad. Like, if you're looking at the love triangle, all of them have issues and all of them end up hurting each other because of those issues, in part. So Conrad's not an exception to that at all. But again, I do feel like the majority of the pain and hurt that Conrad causes is internal. He takes on himself. You know what I mean? Like, of course, his action of internalizing things does have ripple effects of being harmful to others, like Jer feeling left out and Belly being really confused and feeling hurt. Like, all of those things have those effects. But again, I think the most damage that he's doing is on himself, which is maybe something that I can relate to more than Jer. But to be honest, I mean, I also, you know, I see where Jer might be coming from as well. Like, it is, if you've grown up and you've reached a point where you're like, okay, nobody's going to be standing up for me. Like, nobody's going to be looking out for me. I guess I'm going to have to do it for myself. I've definitely had those types of feelings in that situation before. And it's not fun. But it is also necessity at a certain point. It's like, how many times am I going to let myself be, you know, kicked while I'm down, you know? Okay, so another comment, I guess I just interpreted it differently. I don't really see any expectations on Jeremiah's side. Like, he doesn't kiss Belly. She kisses him after he confesses that he has feelings for her. So while I'm not exactly blaming her since she was mad at Conrad, something I don't think he knew, she really didn't need to do anything. If she just told him that she wants to think about it instead of outright accepting or rejecting his advances, the situation may have ended a lot differently. I'm of the opinion that there's nothing inherently wrong with confessing your feelings to someone since they can always simply reject you. For sure. And it's interesting because I completely agree with this, right? And that's something that, like, again, reading comments, like, made me kind of clock into a little bit more. Like, Billy didn't need to do anything. Like, she didn't need to hook up with him. She didn't need to kiss him. Of course, you can psychoanalyze that and get to a point where it's like, I mean, she's confused. I understand why she did it for sure, but she didn't need to, right? Like, that is her responsibility and that is herself. And there is nothing inherently wrong with confessing your feelings to someone. I don't want it to seem like I think that either. Yeah, he was just expressing his feelings and asking whether they were reciprocated, even though he did know they weren't, or if they were, it would always be complicated by her history with and feelings for Conrad. And she didn't need to act on it. She could have turned it down, but, it's impossible to know what would have happened. Had she turned it down, who's to say, like, Jared would have gotten really angry then, and, like, his ego had been really hurt, and he gets really triggered by feeling like Conrad is being chosen yet again, and then he starts shutting Billy out. Like, there's no telling what would have happened had Billy acted differently. I think it's entirely possible that could have happened. I think it's entirely possible that things could have been a lot better. You just kind of don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of, it's the way that it is. But again, I think, like, there's something about Jeremiah entering into the situation fully aware of what he's up against and, like, where his brother and Belly lie, that, again, just makes me kind of go, you knew what you were getting yourself into, at least a little. Yeah, so Belly shouldn't have gotten into it, but I do feel like she was a bit more confused than Jared was. It felt like Jared was fully aware of the situation, as he illustrated this season. He did confirm that. He's, like, talking about the connection between Belly and Conrad and how he now sees it and he understands it and blah, 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 blah. And in that episode that was narrated by him, and also multiple times that he expresses throughout the season where he's like, there's always going to be something between you and Conrad, that type of thing. Knowing that, he still took active steps to engineer a way for him to get his foot in the door by confessing feelings despite knowing that they liked each other. And it's true, like, I mean, he might have been doing that because he's like, this might be my last chance, like, once they finally get together, like, I might not have another chance. So, who the fuck knows? But he did know that. Like, Belly from birth. Everyone knew that. Like, everyone knew how Belly felt. And then Conrad reciprocating recently, because he saw it with his own two eyes, and they showed us seeing it with his own two eyes, and understanding exactly what was happening, and then taking active steps to sabotage what was happening. So he was fully aware of the situation. Whereas I think Belly, like, is more confused. She, like, isn't sure that Conrad likes her, and she, now she's learning that Jared likes her. Like, I think a lot more of her actions have to do with pure confusion, whereas he comes from a much more kind of, like, enlightened, informed place. I think both are somewhat responsible for opening that door, knowing what they knew, but I do think it comes from a place of denial and delusion, as well as confusion for Belly, and Jared's a bit more calculated, like, thinking, oh, I can change the situation, like, I can make this work, I can do this, let me try and do this. Whereas Billy's like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? Girl, I get your point when you say Conrad is doing stuff for Jared, but personally, if my brother hid everything from me and did everything family-related behind my back, I'd be so pissed. Even if it was to protect me, it would just make me not trust him. Totally understand, and this is completely valid. That's one of Conrad's biggest issues, right? It's not, in actuality, like, it doesn't really help anyone in the long run. You can see the pure intention, but, like, hiding things, keeping secrets, not having everyone, have all the same information, not giving other people a chance to, prove themselves or handle a situation, taking it all on yourself, like, that's very isolating, and that's not, the right thing to do at all. Jared is totally in the right to be frustrated at that, but I do feel like, he, like, masquerades that actual very valid criticism into his kind of anger for Conrad and being pissed at Conrad, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that he's, like, all that pissed about Conrad keeping things. No, he is. I mean, I'm not saying he's not, but I think it also, again, has to do with so much more than that. It's like, Conrad is keeping this from me, which must mean he thinks he's better than me, which must mean he's taking it all on himself because he thinks he's the golden boy, and he's always been the golden boy. Nobody has ever trusted me, and nobody ever takes me seriously, and nobody has ever, like, given me a chance. It's all these pent-up years of trauma that is contributing to the level of anger, at least. I'm sorry, but the way Billy Conrads talk about Jeremiah, you'd literally think Billy Conrad wasn't in-game. The Jeremiah hate is so irrational, I just don't understand. Please someone help me understand this energy other than read the book. Book 3, he did this. So I think there's a lot of people that do just default to that, which is funny that you say that, because it's like, oh, that should be a trump card, but then a lot of people like to be like, well, Jenny just did that to sabotage Jeremiah, so it doesn't even count. Like, it's, people can always debate that something isn't valid or isn't a good argument. But for me, like, my sake, I don't hate Jeremiah. I've never hated Jeremiah. I've never, said that I did. But I think more of what I do in these videos, I think, is coming from a place of, like, wanting to explain and expand upon why I am Team Conrad, why I feel the way I do, why I prefer him, why I think Belly and him are better together. And also somewhat in defense to, like, a lot of people who are like, Conrad just treats Belly terribly, Conrad doesn't love Belly, like, those types of things. I'm like, girl, he does. So it's not about like who ends up with who or who like wins in the end at all. It's more just like, this is my perspective. This is the way that I see it. This is why I ship them. I mean, and I think like that discourse is just a part of like fandom in general. You know what I mean? Like, regardless of the way that things end, if there are going to be people arguing the opposite point, then there are going to be people doing counter arguments to that. You know what I mean? Okay, episode 5. I like this episode because I enjoyed seeing Jeremiah's point of view on everything over the last year, and I also like how Jeremiah finally admitted that he had to let Belly go because he wasn't Conrad. I think the moment that changed everything was when they spoke about his graduation quote and how Belly had her mom tape his ceremony so she could watch it. I believe that was the point when he finally let his guard down and was maybe, just maybe, he was like, maybe, just maybe I have a shot. This is a very, very interesting perspective, and I would love to hear, like, I guess the writers and producers, like, and actors, what they think about that, because it could totally be true. Like, that could be kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back in like him finally opening up to Belly again, finally trusting that like this time it's going to be different. I hadn't thought of that particular moment as anything, but that's a very interesting kind of like supposition. I still think he's, you know, putting her through her paces before he trusts her, but her overcompensation is, you know, so great that it's already kind of chipping away at the belief that he had that it was going to be Conrad no matter what. So this is talking about kind of, because I asked in that episode, I was like, are there people who have like platonic relationships, you know, straight relationships that, you know, aren't clouded by like sexual attraction, I guess? And this person said, I have only really had friends that were guys. I would say for me, it either has to be they don't find me attractive or I don't find them attractive. Because if you find someone attractive but start as a friend and they don't feel the same way, it's easier to move on from that feeling. Whereas if you both found each other attractive, it's a little hard to maintain the platonic friendship aspect. I also really like this episode, and I get how people see Jeremiah as being immature or hot-headed, but he has a right to be. The same right that Conrad has to be sad and get distant when he does. He's trying so hard not to act on his feelings with Belly, and Belly's making it so hard. So true. Why don't you want to kiss me is the most confusing line she ever gave. There's no way she can't see how much it's hurting him and how he still has feelings for her. I like Belly and get it. They are all teens, but she has to be careful. For sure. I agree with all of this as well. Again, it's interesting because you're talking about, you know, Jer holding his feelings back. Again, I see that as a very self-preservation thing. Nothing wrong with that at all. He should be preserving himself, especially since Belly is doing this and acting this way, so messy. Whereas a lot of Conrad's holding back or sabotage of his own relationship has to do with his thinking about Belly and Jeremiah's feelings. A lot more than Jeremiah thinks about either Belly or Conrad's feelings in comparison, which is just another like example of that kind of dynamic that has been set up, I feel. Yeah, Belly is making it hard, and I said that in that episode. I was like, girl, what are you doing? Like, this is not fair to Jer. And it wasn't. It's not fair to Jer. You can definitely, you know, do some mental gymnastics to figure out why she's doing it. And again, like I said, I have experience doing a similar thing, and it's fucked up. Like, it's just fucked up. You know, it comes from insecurity, it comes from paranoia, it comes from everyone's inherent need to feel loved and, you know, liking someone being obsessed with you. Like, it's, you know, it's very human, but it's fucked up. Jer has every right to be frustrated about the things that are in Belly's control, like her actions, moves she's making, things she's saying. The thing is, I just get less supportive of his anger towards things that are beyond her control. And it's maybe because I'm more of a sad person. Like, I am more of the kind of sad, distressed, lonely, internalized person myself than I have ever been an angry person or kind of hot-headed or having a bit of a temper or that kind of vibe. Maybe it's biased because I've dealt with people who express their frustrations in a similar way to Jeremiah, and it is very psychologically damaging, to be honest. Like, and again, you know, who knows how things are going to end up. I don't think it's an intentional thing on his part, but again, I think it just has to do with like the effect on other people. People who are more sad, again, it's more internal strife than it is externally affecting other people. People who have anger like that and are being like, you know, condescending or being suggestive or, you know, always huffing and puffing, that type of thing, like, you're putting a lot of stress on the people around you. That's a very kind of damaging thing, which again, him being mad at her for things that she can't control, like her and Conrad having had a relationship or having had a connection, you know, her and Conrad still having any kind of connection. I don't understand. I don't think it's fair for him to be mad at her about that because that's not something that she can control. And it's not something that she's doing for him or to hurt him, even though he's acting like it is. But again, it's just more damaging, I feel, that kind of behavior. He has a right to those feelings for sure, though maybe not all the expression of them, as does Conrad. You know, like, they're on the same playing field with that. Jer's just feels more external, while Conrad's feels more internal. But both are destructive to others at varying degrees. Totally. Last season, before they kiss in the pool, he kind of alludes to the fact that he's liked her for a long time. Because Jer says, first it was Conrad, and then this year it was Cam, and I've waited for my moment, or something like that. Yeah, so that may be indecision on the writer's part, but I'm going to take what they're now making the story, which is that Jeremiah started developing feelings for her the summer that she turned pretty. And so, again, that could have happened in that same timeline of, like, whatever, weeks, months before, where he's like, oh, I know she likes Conrad, and then, oh, now she's dating Cam, and now it's my turn because there's an opening. But again, like, I do think that they're going from a different angle in the books, whereas in the books, again, some of Jeremiah's actions and frustrations make a lot more sense because it's like, apparently he's loved her the entire time, whereas in the show, they're making it that, like, oh, well, when she turned pretty, and not, like, implying that he didn't, like, love her as a person before that, but once she came back that summer, that's when everything changed, and that's when he started seeing her in a romantic way. So I don't really put stock in, like, what they said in the first season, because obviously they're kind of altering it now. This is the new kind of angle that they're going with for Jeremiah, and she's trying to determine if it's best friend or love or love. I didn't read the books, but in the show, they always mention how Jeremiah has been the one who's always been there for Belly, and they have this entire ESP connection. I do feel like Belly will end up with Conrad in the end, which breaks my jelly heart. I do respect Conrad going to Jeremiah and asking him if it's okay to date Belly because he knew Belly would never ask. Interesting. So I tend to agree somewhat, though to me the connection between Belly and Jeremiah, even though it's, undeniable and beautiful to see, it's undoubtedly platonic in my eyes. My interpretation of it, at least. But, with them finding each other's attractive and hormones and things like that can easily be confused, as I've talked about in other episodes. So as for Jeremiah always being there for Belly, this is very interesting because, again, I think there's something funky going on here. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just, wrong. I'm not afraid to, like, admit that as a possibility. But, I wonder if it's unreliable narration for Belly, because she's determined to think Conrad doesn't love her, right? Or to convince herself that Conrad doesn't love her. Or if he does, he doesn't love her how she needs to be loved, or can't love her as well as she needs to be loved, or the way that she needs to be loved. Because the actual evidence that we've been shown aligns more with Conrad being there for her a lot. They've both been there for her. But I really don't think this is coming from, like, I'm Team Conrad bias. At least and if you disagree, like, give me examples, but, like, to me, I can recount many examples of Conrad being there for Belly that they've shown. Yeah, so the evidence just points to Conrad being there just as much, if not more, for Belly than Jeremiah. But again, like, whenever we see Jeremiah being there for Belly, it's always in her narration, it's always very romanticized, and it's always happening whenever she's trying to, like, convince herself that he's better than Conrad, or, like, a better choice than Conrad, or better for her than Conrad. It's always happening in comparison to Conrad. You know what I mean? And so I don't know how much we can, like, trust from that. And I remember the script for episode 8 came out, and it was, like, in one of them, it was, like, Belly, parentheses, convincing herself. And that's, like, what she's doing. A lot of this time she's trying to convince herself to get over Conrad, or, Jeremiah's better, or Jeremiah would be, Jeremiah works. And so it's interesting, like, coming from her perspective when she's saying, like, Jeremiah's always been there for me, when I feel like, in actuality, we've seen them both be there for her just as much. You know what I mean? But the narrative in Belly's mind becomes, Conrad's never there for me, but Jer's always been there for me, which just isn't true, but it's what she's telling herself in order to convince herself. Here's the question I pose. At what point is enough actually enough for Belly? And her trying to constantly try again with Conrad, because yes, they love each other, obviously, but he clearly isn't equipped to be in a serious relationship given his behavioral patterns during turmoil. And her being with Jer will probably last a little bit until the lust and passion between them fades. Realistically, sometimes love isn't enough. And at this point, I genuinely feel like she needs to start looking outside of the Fisher family and go have some fun with some cute boys. I absolutely agree. I think she needs to, not be in the Fisher family pool for quite a while. And I think if and when she is in the Fisher family pool, she should only be with one of them. It shouldn't, let's just make the decision. Okay, let's just, put an end to this. Yeah, love isn't always enough. And I've never, like, claimed that Belly and Conrad have the best or healthiest communication. They both, need to learn and grow before getting back together, before they can have, like, a healthy, stable relationship, which, unfortunately, Jer's kind of used as a plot device to make that happen. It's like, okay, well, this relationship with Jer, their time apart, they'll both learn and they'll both grow, and then by the time they get back together, they're both more mature and they can communicate better and they both know what they lost and, that type of stuff. But I just wish she was with someone that wasn't Jeremiah in the meantime. I wish that same thing happened, but it was like she had gotten a relationship with someone, again, not with the last name Fisher, because it just makes everything so messy. And it is like the Bridgerton effect where it's like, you're just making things so messy that at the end it's like, girl, it's hard for like anyone to be happy. I don't know how they're going to get a lot of people to root for Belly, because it feels like they're actively trying to get people to root against her, which I have to say feels a little soft. Because like right now it's like both the boys are perfect, especially episode 8. It was like both the boys are absolute perfection, and Belly's the one who's going to screw them over, and Belly made this decision, and Belly is going to she's cruel to both of them, that type of stuff. And they're just making it so messy that I'm just like, girl, how is anyone from any side going to be like completely satisfied? And someone said like the book wasn't that satisfying either, and I agree, but this just makes it even worse that like her and Jeremiah being together, it just makes it even worse for when they won't be together, and for Conrad's sake while they are together. You know what I mean? Okay, so episode 6, agree, that's probably my favorite episode of the whole series. Lola and Chris' amazing chemistry and acting shows again this episode. There were so many great Conrad moments which showed what powerful and intense connection they have, in contrast to the lustful and a little superficial one with Jer. So in my opinion, Conrad won the episode, especially because Jer didn't show his best side at all and acted quite immature. Anyways, love your reactions. Thank you. Yeah, they're again, to me, like, their love seems genuine in the fact that it has a foundation and a basis from which to be built upon of friendship. Like, I think they love each other as people. I think they love each other as friends. They are lifelong friends, besties. And then I do think everything on top of that that's like trying to be made into a romantic connection from both sides, in my opinion, from both sides, is not completely like genuine. And I don't think either of them realize that, but I think, like I said before, Jeremiah, it has a lot to do with competition. It has a lot to do with feeling chosen, wanting to feel chosen over Conrad, finally. And for Belly, it has a lot to do with her convincing herself that Conrad doesn't love her or can't love her, and that Jer is really the one that does. And also, just, I think they're misinterpreting their, like, sexual attraction to each other as, like, something really deep, when it's like, y'all just think each other is hot. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's not like, you can have the love for each other as a person, and you can have a sexual attraction. That doesn't add up to, like, a real, genuine, great love and deep connection. It does feel very superficial. Because also, I mean, comparatively speaking, what have Jer and Belly ever, like, talked about? And maybe they'll show more in season 3, but, like, her and Conrad have talked about literally everything. Trauma, grief, their family dynamics, divorce, death, cancer, like, and not that Jer and Belly don't talk about some of the same things, because they do, but, like, they just have such a, like, at least what they've shown is such a deeper connection than more superficial one. You know what I mean? Like, it goes so deep. It's so serious. You know what I mean? Like, it's so serious. They're so serious. As opposed to, with Conrad and Belly, a more emotionally deep and vulnerable connection with Conrad. Like, granted, they had a relationship, so it actually gives them the opportunity to have more of those moments shown in the show. And who knows what they'll do in season 3, but I actually think it would be smart, and I think they are going to do in season 3. They're going to show romantic incompatibility with Jer and Belly, in that even when they are in a romantic relationship and they have those opportunities to have more of a deep, meaningful connection, it still remains kind of superficial or immature, which I think ties back to the fireworks comment. She's mistaking fireworks for sexual tension right now. Like, she's like, yeah, she feels strongly about Jeremiah right now. I think, one, because she's trying desperately to get him back in her life, and also because hormones and sexual attraction and confusion. And I think once their relationship, like, levels out a little bit more, it's going to be a little bit clearer to her that, it's not enough. And those fireworks, like, it's not what she wanted. It's not what she thought it was. Whereas, like, with Cam, she felt little to nothing. She's also trying to convince herself that the fireworks she has with Conrad are bad. So she's in search of a similar but different feeling. So that's why, like, in comparatively speaking, she's like, yeah, no, Cam, no fireworks. Jeremiah, he's sexy. And he's my bestie. And then Conrad's like, love my life. But, like, she's like, this is too extreme. This is not enough. Somewhere in the middle. And that's where Jared is coming into the picture, I think. Honestly, I am and will always be Team Jeremiah, but not for Belly. Belly only wants Jeremiah when she's not getting attention from Conrad. And then she says, I don't want to be in the middle of this. And then is always in the middle of it every other time. Like, yes, Jared went a bit far using Belly to get to Conrad, but his point was valid. He just needs someone that will put him first and not go to him as a second option like Belly does. Very true. Jared deserves someone who's going to love him as much as he loves them, which is not Belly. Which is, again, and this is very much, especially second season, majority Belly's fault. But we can't deny that Jared has some culpability in this, because he has said multiple times, there's always going to be something between you and Conrad. And he knows he's never going to be comfortable with that. He knows he's never going to like that. And he also knows that probably what would be preferable to him is for them to have no contact whatsoever, which, if you feel the need to take away, like, an important person in your significant other's life, something's wrong there. Either their relationship is weird, your relationship is weird, something is wrong there. Because it's just not healthy, It's not realistic, and it's not congruous to like a compatible relationship where it's like, oh, I feel the need to evict this person from your life in order to, and I know Belly's doing it herself, but I mean, you cannot say that Jared doesn't want this, wouldn't prefer it, or hasn't implied that this is what he basically wants, and Belly is doing it accordingly. But like, you know, exiling Conrad from her life in order for her to be able to like be in a relationship with Jeremiah, or like feel, or for him to feel comfortable about the relationship, something's wrong. So there is culpability that Jared still shares, because he's expressed like knowing it's always going to be Conrad, knowing the feeling of like being put second, and even though Belly is working really hard to prove to him that she's putting him first and she's choosing him, and that is on her. That is completely on her. And the majority of the second season, like the fault is on her. You know, again, Jared still knows somewhat what he's getting himself into. And I think, yeah, it just shows an immaturity that he's not really thinking about like long term, like what this means. Like if he wants them to not have any connection, like I don't know. There's just a lot. But when people want Jared and Belly together, as opposed to like, oh, they're a cute couple or they would be a cute couple, it confuses me because I'm like, well, it's just, at least to me, I'm like, it's just always going to be Conrad. So like, yeah, sure, Jared deserves better. Jared deserves someone that like loves them as much as he loves them, right? Like it's, you know. So when people want them together, I'm like, you want him to be like second choice? I don't know about all that. Because that's what he'll be. But again, the show's like trying to convince us that it's not that. I just don't. I guess they're just not doing a good job of convincing me, at least. Like, I just don't see it. And that might be my own personal experience with this type of love, that I'm like, girl, you are not over him. But, like, and Lola's good at acting, so it's not, I don't know that it's, like, bad at acting. It's some, like, iffy writing, but it's just, like, you're just, who are you trying to fool? Like, girl, you know what I mean? Like, it isn't working for me. It is not adding up for me. If you were a Jared fan and watching that scene when he caught her, you wouldn't be able to breathe, literally. Perhaps. You know, and I acknowledge that in the video. But again, like I said in another video, like the delivery still icks me out. Like, I just can't see Conrad saying that line in that way. And again, it's like a personality thing. Like, I am more attracted to someone who is less, I guess, like of a charmer or a flirt than Jared is. And kind of like knows he's hot shit a little bit. So I'm more like moved by earnesty, which is more Conrad's MO. So, but again, like that, like you don't need to fall to catch my attention. Like I said, like if Conrad were to deliver that line, it would be not in the way that Jeremiah delivered it. You know what I mean? Episode 7. Can we talk about how Conrad was the only one apologizing this entire episode? And not once did Jared apologize for how shitty he treated Conrad. How is this supposed to be Jeremiah's season? But the only character actually taking accountability for their actions and wanting to be better is Conrad. This might piss some people off, and I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't recall a time that Jeremiah has apologized to anyone for any of his actions. And again, I could be wrong. I could be not remembering something. But especially second season, he definitely never apologized to Conrad for anything. And he didn't really apologize to Belly. Like, it was all about everyone apologizing to him and making it up to him, which again, I think ties back into that inclination that he has to prioritize and protect himself. But yeah, no, Jared, I don't remember him apologizing for anything or ever admitting, like, that he was wrong. And Conrad is the person who's doing that. And, I mean, Belly is as well, although some of her actions then kind of negate that. But, yeah, that's a big difference between them, and that's something I noticed, and it's something that, again, I'm just like, y'all. I'm just like, this is more... And again, I bet a lot of people are like, Jeremiah doesn't have anything to apologize for. But, like, his unfounded, like, hatred for his brother... He should apologize for that. He should apologize for dragging Belly into that fight. He should apologize for making them feel bad about having any kind of relationship whatsoever. Like, there's a lot of things that he's done wrong that he could and should apologize for, but he just isn't. Conrad, on the other hand, is. Like, Conrad, in his mind, he's always responsible for everything that's ever gone wrong, ever. And in Jared's mind, he's never responsible for anything that's ever gone wrong, ever. You know what I mean? You do make an interesting point about Jeremiah continuing to be jealous/unhappy with Belly and Conrad's connection, in addition to Jeremiah's general negativity towards Conrad. With Jeremiah's statement that he doesn't want to be a happy-go-lucky guy who's always smiling anymore, I'm wondering if they'll shift his motivations to cheating in season... I'm wondering if they'll shift his motivations for something in season 3. I'm assuming that story is not going to change. I don't think so either. Will he find out that Conrad and Belly slept together and reflect on why their relationship doesn't progress in the same way? Will this lead to resentment and him questioning if Belly loves him in the same way as Conrad and led to the eventual thing? Her virginity did play a role in book 3, and changing this fact in the show makes me curious how it's going to impact the story going forward. I am also curious about this change, and I think it's a big one, and it's another one why I was kind of, at the beginning of the season, I was like kind of hoping they were going to change it, and maybe have the same storyline from book 3, but just have it be a love triangle with someone other than Jeremiah. And this crucial change of them having Belly and Conrad have sex, I thought was a good sign that they would, because it's just so messy, to have her like be with both of them. Or, but again, I can just see a world where Jeremiah just goes apeshit once he finds out that they had sex. Like, I can just see a world where it's like nice guy Jeremiah is goodbye bye. Like, he's just absolutely, he just goes kind of crazy over that. Who knows? I don't know how it's gonna. I don't know how they're gonna do. I don't know. Who knows? Okay, I have a lot more comments. I didn't realize. I might have to do like a part 2 or something. I didn't realize how many I had. There's a lot about Belly being selfish and an unlikable protagonist. Again, I think they're making her a lot more unlikable, by the changes that they did, particularly in episode 8. And I don't know, like, the end game of where that's going to lead up. Like, do you want everyone against her at the end? Like, do you want nobody to be happy for anybody? Like, I just don't really know what that's going to completely help with anything other than just making people hate Belly. Literally. Yeah, she's messy. Like, I've never said that. The thing is, I don't think the writing for her makes sense. I don't really know what they're trying to do, and I have tried to understand it. I've tried desperately to be like, okay, so they're going with an angle that, like, Belly, like, really does want to choose Jeremiah, so, like, why would that be? And it's like, it's just, like, it defies logic and reason, so you're just, like, doing mental gymnastics to try and figure out what the fuck is going on and why she's making the decisions that she is. Because maybe they did too, like, thorough of a job, like, establishing Belly and Conrad. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, well, anything else in comparison is just going to fall short, or, like, at least for, like, in-game material, it's going to be like, okay, well, it's obviously going to be Belly and Conrad. So, like, they're trying to, like, retcon that maybe by being like, no, see, this time she has the choice of Conrad, but she's choosing Jeremiah. But I just don't get it, and I just don't think, like, it makes sense, and I just don't buy it, I guess. Like, and I don't know whose fault that is. I really don't. I'm interested to see, like, what Lola has to say about it, especially when, like, her contract's up and, like, she could, speak the truth and not be like, ooh, who knows, which it's up in the air. Like, she's very obviously partial to one side, but, And again, Jenny's trying to make it, like, seem like the endgame might change. I'm telling you, it's not going to change. They're not changing it. Is there anyone who, like, actually thinks that's going to change? Let me know. I'd be interested to know. But, like, they're not going to change it. They're just not. In my opinion. They're just not. So, I don't know, like, again, I'm like, okay, well, if you're, like, trying to convince people that, like, oh, well, she could end up with Jeremiah, it's just like, girl, what? Like, the whole thing just doesn't make any fucking sense. You're saying everything I've been thinking about Jeremiah all season, ever since he's gonna break your heart. So many things he said this season made me dislike him so much this season, and I'm so disappointed. I wanted to briefly enjoy Jelly for the chemistry, but it's been ruined by Jerry's misplaced possessiveness over Belly and passive aggression towards anything Conrad related. I agree that they don't have romantic chemistry, but they're compensating with sexual attraction and friendship. Period. I agree. His possessiveness, his passive aggression toward, and condescension toward both of them, his hatred for Conrad, the difference in, like, again, Jared's like, he's gonna break your heart, oh, he threw you away like trash, and oh, he dumped your ass, and oh, you didn't see that coming, blah, 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 blah. Versus Conrad's like, do you want to be with Jeremiah? Like, it's for Conrad, it seems to be so much more about what Belly wants than anything else, and for Jeremiah, it's solely about what he wants. Like, it's not, and he's trying to, like, distort reality to, like, fit his, what he wants. You know what I mean? It's like, rather than just, like, recognizing the reality of the situation, which is, like, Belly feels more for Conrad. But then she's leading him on, so, like, it's just, like, again, it's just fucking a mess. It's just such a mess. I don't even fucking know. I love this episode, but I'm Team Jer. Sorry, this episode had some great moments all around. This kiss had to be one of the hottest I've ever seen. Gavin and Lola's chemistry is unmatched. I couldn't find it in myself to feel bad for Conrad. He's had so many opportunities to tell Belly his feelings and just hasn't. Team Jeremiah deserves a win, finally. Yeah, so I just also think this is, love that for you. Love that you're happy. It's funny because I'm like, okay, so I'm understanding what, Jer girlies were going through season 1, because, whew. So, what, glad it's like we're getting payback, sure, even the scales. I hope, even Jer people who watch these videos, who watch these reactions, I hope at the very least my suffering brought you joy and satisfaction as a Team Jeremiah person. But, I do think Conrad has told her. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even put that on Conrad in the show. In the books I can, but I can't even put that on Conrad in the show because he's literally told her many times, and even times where he hasn't directly verbalized it, it's been pretty clear in his actions. But I think, again, Belly so idolizes him and places him on a pedestal where she's already thinking of them on such different levels. She's like, he's so far above me and I'm so far below him, he could never love me. Which is why I think it's going to be good for them to have that balance restored where, like, she now sees them as both, like, just people, so that they can have a healthy, successful relationship. Oh, there's so many comments in here. I don't... Girl, I thought I was going to be able to do, like, a whole comprehensive thing. I don't know that I even can. Because there's a lot more comments and there's a lot more, like, things. Does anybody even care? if nobody gives a fuck, then, like, I just won't go through the effort of making this. But I have a lot more thoughts. There's just so many things that I have to talk about. Yeah, I also don't like the, like, dynamic that's set up by her choosing Jer, because it almost is like she has to not have a relationship with Conrad in any capacity whatsoever in order for her to have a romantic relationship with Jer, whereas I think, at least in her mind, a romantic relationship with Conrad and a best friendship with Jeremiah could very easily coexist, and do, really. And, like, the thing is, she needs to be there for both of them, and I don't like that, like, being romantically involved with one or the other makes it hard or less likely for her to be there for the other one. You know what I mean? And I think her being with Jeremiah, like, makes it impossible for her to be there for Conrad at all. So then Conrad's just alone. But then again, like, maybe Jer really was, you know, felt very alone when she was with Conrad, and she said that she kind of forgot about Jer, but I don't know. This whole thing is just crazy, dude. You 100% expressed everything I felt watching the character assassination of Belly. It's infuriating. How are we as viewers supposed to support and relate to her? She's so selfish and inconsiderate. At least in the books, we could understand why she went to Jeremiah. This just makes no sense. This season pissed me off so much. LMAO, how are we supposed to root for Belly with Conrad in season 3 after what she just did? I mean, to be honest, I'm still going to root for them. Like, it's not, you know. But they made it so much more messy. They made her so much more of, like, a villain in this situation, and kind of made, like, Jeremiah, in this episode, in episode 8 in particular, like, they made Jeremiah and Conrad both just, like, innocent, perfect angel victims, and then Belly's just the one who's destroying both of them, and it's just like, girl. I think it does make sense in the book, more so, because of the way that Conrad has, like, treated her and been a little bit more wishy-washy, and she's like, I don't know that he loves me, but I feel loved by Jer, so I'm gonna go with Jer. It makes a lot more sense why she did what she did, versus in the show, him, like, telling her his feelings, and then her still choosing Jer. I think it's just like, okay, you're gonna choose Jer, and then, like, go back to Conrad, which we all know is gonna happen. Like, for what? Like, this just is destructive for everyone. Yeah, they're just, I mean, she's like the fall guy. Like, she's just really taking the brunt of it. It's like, okay. And I also don't know that it's, like, completely in character. It doesn't really make sense. Her, like, kind of heartlessness a little bit when it comes to Conrad in particular is a little strange and felt a little bit out of character, because it was like, she, like, didn't seem to care at all that he was upset. Didn't seem to care at all that, you know, she was hurting him, that he could see, that, you know, didn't ask about his test. Like, it's just, like, kind of such a 180, but, again, this is Belly's fault, but I have to say, the dynamic that Jeremiah has set up with making her feel so bad about her relationship with Conrad 24/7, and making her really work hard to prove herself to Jer to get back into his life again, I think gives almost an ultimatum, even though Jer never said an ultimatum, but gives almost an ultimatum of, like, you either are going to choose to care about me or choose to care about him. And, like, you're not allowed to care about the other one. So, like, all of a sudden, now that she's chosen Jer in her mind, she, like, can't care about Conrad at all, which I just don't think that makes any sense. I think that's crazy. I think it's disingenuous, and I think it's inspired by a really kind of, like, unhealthy dynamic that's set up, because why else would she be doing that? And to prove to herself that, like, oh no, I am over him. Right? Like, I don't care about his feelings, and I care about Jeremiah's feelings, so fuck Conrad. Like, but it's just out of character for her. It doesn't make sense for her or their relationship. They broke up not that long ago at all. Like, her first time, her first love, like, the lack of care and consideration that she has for Conrad and his feelings at the end of the season doesn't make any sense. And really, like, rubs me the wrong way. It makes her just seem like a shitty person. Rather than, I think, like, anybody kind of exploring the option that maybe she's doing this to try and prove herself to Jeremiah. Which, again, if Jeremiah's put such a pressure on her to prove herself, is she on herself? That's not the healthiest dynamic either. That she feels the need to, like, cut Conrad out and just, you know, show Jer that she doesn't give a fuck about him whatsoever. But I don't know. It just didn't feel right. Like, it just, and again, like, I think she should have love for both these boys regardless of anything. You know what I mean? And I think they're like taking that aspect out of it and away from it, which just really doesn't sit right with me, especially because they are like family and they are friends. Like, aside from her being in love with Conrad, she does have a friendship with him. She does have a connection with him. She does have a relationship with him. They're like family. You know what I mean? They've known each other their entire lives. And Jared just like expects them to not have a connection anymore. And Belly's just okay with like never talking to Conrad, never doing anything for Conrad again, not giving a fuck about what he's going through. You know what I mean? And I bet you it's going to be in season 3 that they like haven't talked or seen each other in years. I bet you that's what it's going to be, because like the only way that a successful Jeremiah Belly relationship can even happen is if Conrad's completely out of the picture. So again, they're kind of like villainizing Belly and making her seem super heartless, but also not even acknowledging the impact that the pressure Jeremiah's been putting on her might have in her decisions and in her quote-unquote heartless treatment towards Conrad. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, well, Belly must be responsible for literally everything, and nothing must be either Conrad or Jeremiah's fault. Actually, and they made them very perfect, which again, it doesn't make sense. The 180 that they did on Jeremiah in episode 8 makes no fucking sense. All of a sudden, he's like, I'll be fine with you guys, like, be together, like, I'm fine. And I loved seeing it, because that's what I want from him. That's what I want from either of them and both of them, and that, like, love for his brother, that love for Belly, that kind of self-sacrifice or selflessness, that maturity, all of that, love to see it. But it's also just simply not what Jared has been doing this entire season. It is completely contradictory to everything he's been doing this entire season. And honestly, for both seasons, like, his whole philosophy, his whole thing is like, you know, being like, no, Jared, no, Belly and Conrad, like, he can't, he hasn't been able to accept them ever once, even when they were dating, even though it wasn't that long, so who knows if, like, given more time, he would have. He couldn't accept them then. He couldn't accept that, like, she had chosen Conrad over him then, and I know people are, like, think that he did, but the thing is, treating people with such hostility like he did, that's not actually accepting it. You know what I mean? Like, that's, sure, you can, like, I guess not try and break up their relationship and you can say that that's accepting it. But if you're like basically abandoning your friendship with someone and basically like just, you know, you hate them all of a sudden pretty much, that's not really accepting that relationship. That's not really accepting that she chose Conrad over Jeremiah. Because you're still like, you're not at peace with it. You haven't accepted it. It's conditional. It's like, you can't be friends with me if you choose this, or I can't like give you the same type of support that I would otherwise, since you've chosen this. And they show that over and over and over and over again with Jeremiah this entire fucking season. And then, like, what, last episode, all of a sudden he's like, I'm fine. I'm fine with whatever happens. I want this to be over. If y'all want to be together, I want you to be happy. I'm going to be happy. Like, and it seemed very sincere. And I know that they wanted it to seem sincere, because they wanted us to be like, well, both of these boys are just so selfless and they're willing to like give up everything for Belly and they just want Belly's happiness more than anything. Which again, I love seeing a more selfless side to Jer, and less anger and less resentment towards both Belly and Conrad, because it's just not, it's like such a festering pit of toxicity a little bit. No, okay, someone's quoting me, now I'm gonna be a, and then they put in parentheses, Jeremiah hater. I was content with keeping my mouth shut, but next season, this is you not being a Jeremiah hater? Love the reactions. Thank you. And I was talking about being a Jeremiah Belly hater, because, and I really also don't know. Maybe I was a little bit of a Jeremiah hater throughout. But again, like, I feel like I don't think a lot of people watch the discussion section, because, like, they'll comment things, and I'm like, I literally talked about this and said the exact opposite. But, you know, every criticism I've given Jeremiah, I've been pretty good about cushioning it with, like, disclaimer, I don't hate him. This is not hate, you know, and here's why I think what I do. But in that particular instance, I was talking about being a Jeremiah and Belly hater, because I had kind of resigned myself to the fate of just kind of being like, if you watch my episode 7 reaction, you know, during their kiss, I'm just kind of, like, I was just going to keep my mouth shut and just be like, okay. Like, not say anything. But now, the way that they've done it with Belly, the way that Belly's doing it, and the way that, like, their relationship is going to hurt Conrad, and the way that then Belly is going to hurt Jeremiah, I'm just like, I'm a hater. And I couldn't not be a hater in that moment, because I was like, why the fuck are you doing this to my girl Belly? Why are you doing this to all of them? Why are you setting my girl up like this? I don't think Ginny's writing is as great as we make it out to be. No. Love Ginny. Did I ever say she was a great writer? Yeah, no, the writing this season was weird. I can't lie. Like, it was weird. I think they had a lot of different things that they were going for. I think they weren't sure about some of the things they were going for, and they kind of went back and forth. There was a little bit of indecision. There were a little bit of, like, retconning, like, you know, doing a 180, some character assassination. It was weird. Even as a Jelly fan, a lot of decisions just didn't make sense. Yeah. I was also waiting for something in that flashback scene with Jer and Belly that would show why she would pick him, because we all know she would in this season. Instead, it was literally just him being cold to her again. It seems like the show is being messy for the sake of being messy, and it's ruining characters in the process. I agree. Okay, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how Belly feels about and treats Conrad at the end when she gets together with Jarrett with no hesitation. Worry about how it might hurt Conrad, none whatsoever compared to her in the beginning of the season, the flashbacks, how she didn't want to hurt Jarrett and told Conrad they should hit pause. The change does not seem in character that she's so much less considerate about Conrad. Is her acting like she doesn't give a shit about Conrad's feelings part of her denial of her own? Like, is she making it messy and being selfish on purpose? Belly and Jared were so much less considerate of Conrad than he is of their feelings and happiness. I agree with you that show made it so much worse than the books, but I guess the drama and angst will make it that much better in season 3. Yeah, no, I talked a little bit about this, but I hated it. I thought it was weird. I thought it was out of character. I do think, honestly, if I had to, like, give any kind of psychoanalysis towards it, to be honest, a lot of the things that I'm psychoanalyzing, okay, this is a good disclaimer. A lot of the things that I'm saying in my psychoanalyzation of these characters, I honestly don't know that it's intentional on the writer's parts. You know, like, I'm doing a lot of gymnastics to, like, make it make sense. And I like the, you know, kind of hypotheses that I come up with a lot of the time and think it could be accurate, but I don't think that the writers are thinking about it from this perspective. I think it's a lot more careless, or not careless, but a lot less thought out than that. Like, it's not that deep. But if I had to, like, assign a meaning to it, to me, what it gives a little bit is that she feels an unconditional love from Conrad. And again, I don't think if this is what is happening or what they're going for, like, I don't think she's conscious of this, but I think she feels an unconditional love for Conrad, from Conrad, whereas Jeremiah's is conditional. And so she has to fight much harder and be much more vigilant to try and win that back or earn it back, and even more so to continue to keep it. Whereas she knows Conrad's not going to, like, hate her or, you know, cut her out or freeze her out or stop talking to her or be mean to her like Jer has been, regardless of how she treats him or what she does. So, like, it's more of like maybe a coddling thing of, like, I think she's more afraid to lose Jeremiah or something, or she feels like Jeremiah and her relationship is more, the depth of it is dependent on Jeremiah's feelings and, like, ego and, like, whether he feels like he's, you know, being chosen or not, or, you know, that type of thing. I also do think it's definitely denial. It's definitely some denial and delusion, but it did seem weird and out of character, because I wish it could be that, like, and maybe they will explore this in season 3, like, I would like if, you know, there was a part where, like, Jeremiah basically is like, no, you can't have a relationship with Conrad anymore, and she's like, but I love Conrad. Like, as a person, we're, like, family. He's your family. Like, why are you telling me I can't, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just such a kind of crazy thing to be, like, expecting her to cut off that relationship. But, to be honest, she's doing it. And it's not like Jeremiah's even asked her to do that thus far, even though, to be honest, his reactions speak volumes. You know what I mean? But that's still of her own volition. She took it upon herself to be acting that way and to be acting like she didn't care about Conrad's feelings. But yeah, I think she just is, like, really good at convincing herself of things. I think she's, like, replaying everything that Conrad's ever done that might have been ill-intentioned, and she's making that the narrative instead of being, like, you know, thinking about all the sweet times with Conrad and all the things that he's done for her and the love and all the things he's going through. Like, I just feel like she feels like she can't care about Conrad if she wants Jeremiah in her life. And that's more than any romance. I think that's kind of the choice that she's made. But the fact that she even feels the need to make a choice, whereas, again, I don't think Conrad would ever make her feel that way, would ever make her feel bad about having any kind of relationship with Jer. Granted, it is different because her and Conrad's relationship is, you know, more of a threat to her and Jer's relationship than vice versa. But still, I mean, Conrad wants them to be friends. Conrad wants them to have a relationship. He wouldn't, you know, he's not insecure that way. But I guess, like, Jeremiah does have a right to be insecure in that because there's truth in his, like, suspicions. But Billy's trying to act like there isn't. So, you know, who knows? That's, yeah. So that whole thing's messy. But can you talk about the letters getting mixed up and how she wakes up on his side of the bed and Conrad is the sun in her life? Yes, loved that lighting. And I've seen a lot of edits to that scene where it's like, the lyric, I once thought love would be black and white, but it's golden. And so Jeremiah's in the dark, and then Conrad and Belly are in the, you know, light, that shadow. In the motel scene, I thought that was a very beautiful scene, very well constructed. I mean, you know, if they're going to be doing a lot of confusing things with writing, I like that visually, symbolically, they're keeping a consistent thread of, like, no, this is the through line. Like, this is what it is. This is how it is. This is what, like, in their hearts it is. Yeah, love to see it. And yeah, I didn't even realize until I was watching the premiere, until I was watching my video premiere and saw people commenting, I was like, oh my god, Laurel dropped the letters. I hope they kind of change it from the book, though. I won't give spoilers, I guess, people haven't read the third book, but I wanted it to be even more clear. Like, it was kind of a little unclear in the book. Like, I think they were going for something, and my brain just automatically filled it in. I was like, okay, this is what you're basically trying to say, but, like, they were kind of, like, iffy. They were kind of wishy-washy on whether or not they really went there. So I hope they just are going to go there, or take it out completely, but they're obviously not going to if they did the switching of letters in this season. I can't imagine how they'll fix things in season 3 without making it seem rushed and forced. Yeah. Luckily, there's 10 episodes, thank God. But yeah, I'm scared. Oh, I'm getting Bridgerton PTSD and flashbacks. I still need to do a Bridgerton video. If you'd be interested in a Bridgerton video, let me know. Because the thing, okay, here's the thing. If people are like, oh, I want to see this video, then I'll get all inspired. I'm like, oh, period, okay, I'll do it. And then I'll start working on it. But, like, if no one says anything, it's just crickets, I'm like, well, you know, what's the point? So, anyway. But I do need to do that. I want to do that. But yeah, again, one of the problems was how rushed this season was. The timeline was weird. All of this is happening, like, a couple weeks after the funeral, which means a month after, or maybe it's a month after the funeral, but means that Belly and Conrad worked together really recently. Their breakup is not ancient history at all. It happened very recently. And then in this, like, 4-day period, she just flips a switch and is like, no, I want Jeremiah all of a sudden, despite all this stuff with Conrad. Okay, make it make sense. The way I see it, the changes they made from the book here made it seem like Belly just straight up chose Jeremiah over Conrad with no ulterior motive, which just confuses me, even as someone who roots for Jer way more, because now I have no idea what they're going to do in season 3. Completely agree. Like, it's just... Again, the only thing that I can think that it does is, like, lend a little credence to, like, could Belly and Jeremiah be endgame also? Like, let's level the playing field a little bit. See, she had the opportunity to choose Conrad, but she chose Jeremiah over him, rather than it being a miscommunication. But again, I don't think that really benefits anyone in the long run. It just makes everything messier, and it makes Belly a million times more unlikable. Can you talk more about how the show is literally setting Belly up? Because I do not remember being this mad at her in the books. Absolutely. I mean, I said it multiple times. They are, and again, the way that they set it up, where both the boys are doing everything right. Conrad is verbally and directly expressing his feelings, being vulnerable with her, telling her straight up, like, I love you, or I want you. Of course I want you. They're having, Jer and Conrad have this discussion that's very mature, that's very, like, you know, they're shaking hands, they're like, may the best man win, that type of thing. They're like, I'm gonna accept it no matter what, like, but we need to make sure that everything's out on the table. And Jer has come to this point where all of a sudden, I don't know where, apparently he's gonna be okay if Belly were to choose if Belly were to choose Conrad. He's gonna accept that, and he's gonna be okay, and he's not gonna bother it and get in between it and sabotage it anymore, whatsoever. So both these boys are, like, literally doing all the right things. They're being perfect little angels. And then they have Belly just, like, being shitty to both in the long run by the choice that she makes and the way that she's acting. It's really kind of crazy. It's really kind of crazy. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And honestly, to be honest, like, I can't see them going a lot into the psyche of Belly in season 3. Like, I don't think they're going to be like, it was as deep as the denial and delusion that I've been talking about, even though I think it... If it's not that, then I'm just like, I just don't believe whatever's happening, you know what I mean? Like, if they're trying to literally say, like, she now loves Jer more and she actually wants Jer over Conrad or something, like, I just don't get that. I don't buy it. So maybe that's just, like, unsuccessful. But regardless, I doubt they're going to make it, you know, a thing of, like, they're really going to explore Belly's feelings for, like, why she chose Jeremiah, or, like, why she did think the worst of Conrad or something like that. Like, I don't think they're really going to get into it, even though it would benefit from them doing that. I think there's an argument for character assassination because of Belly's lack of empathy for Conrad at the beginning of the episode and everything about bigger than the whole sky. Yeah, absolutely. But thinking of the flip side, she would be irredeemable if she chose Jeremiah under the pretense that Conrad was not only over her, but wanted nothing to do with her anymore. If he pushed her towards Jer even more, like in the books, and he was second choice again, when Jer and Belly have talked about it over and over this season as something that so deeply hurt him, and he was actively avoiding to the best of his ability, and now Conrad knows Jer wants Belly to choose and respects her choice. You can't keep it like the books after that, or else you risk audience jumping both ships and petitioning for new love interests for Conrad and Jer next season. That's an interesting point. I mean, there's definitely truth to that. To be honest, I think the whole thing's kind of like a train wreck shit show. Like, I don't know that anyone really knows what they're doing. I don't think any of it really makes sense. They're making it a lot messier. I definitely don't prefer it because it just makes Belly look so much worse. Well, it depends on how they do Jer and Belly's relationship. Because if they end up making their relationship, like, really unhealthy and bad in the long run, then maybe we can get away with all this. And maybe that is what they're going to do. And again, the thing that's in the book, you know, a lot of people basically see that as something that Jenny wrote to just explain, like, a to just kind of get that option off the table. So it's like, okay, you can be okay with the ending. So I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do with that. But I maybe I'll come across it later. But I remember another comment being like, Conrad girlies are like, Conrad tells her how much she loves her, and then quotes him later in the episode saying like, I was just messing with you, or I was just trying to sabotage you and Jeremiah, whatever he says. And like, I just thought that was such a funny comment because I was like, you're over your head, I guess, because like. Because that argument is just moot for the show. Like, Conrad has literally so many times showed how much he loves her over and over and over again, verbally, physically, actionally, in his eyes, in his face, in his expressions, in his actions. Like, he tells her, he's trying to get back with her in that one conversation by the trash can where he's like, if I could do it differently, like, I never would have, and like, he's explaining why he was that way, that it had nothing to do with her, that it had nothing to do with their relationship. He didn't want it to be like that. He didn't want to end it like that. He thought he was doing the right thing for her. Like, he's explained his actions so many times. And then, like, on the beach, they were talking about, she was like, I thought we loved each other. He said, we did. So he's literally admitting that they loved each other right then, which, again, admitting his part in that, which is that he loves her or loved her. And then, again, making it clear, I do still want you. Of course I do. So that's a very clear indication. Okay. God, there's so much more. I have like a million more comments and things. Fuck! Okay. Shit. I'm sure this video is already going to be fucking long as fuck. But there's still a lot more to talk about and still a lot more to get through. And a lot more comments to respond to. And I still haven't really gone quite into depth on like my review of each of the episodes and like what happens. Definitely not the last episode, like, at all. But I don't want to be a broken record, and I don't really want to be, like, making this stuff if, like, nobody's gonna actually give a fuck. So, I guess what I'm saying is that I'm kind of dying right now, if you can't tell from my physical state. I think I need to stop. But, if people would want to see it, I'd be happy to do more of a discussion and a dive. And who knows, maybe it's like no one wants to see it, but I just feel the need to get things off my chest or defend, my point of view or something like that. Who knows? But just give me your input, like, because I don't know if I want to put all this effort and energy into, like, and time into this if, like, nobody is going to watch it or nobody cares or everyone's like, shut the fuck up, Sammy. Like, no one wants to hear from you. Or, like, I'm beating a dead horse and I'm just repeating things that I've already said. So I guess just comment, let me know what you want, if there's things that I didn't. If you do want me to make another part to this, I also might make a little, like, basically podcast episode with my, one of my besties who watches as well. But there's so many more comments, there's so much more to get to that I didn't even get to, and stuff that we just kind of, like, scratched the surface on, but I need to stop filming. So I guess just let me know where your head's at. Do you care? Do you want another one? Do you not want another one? Are you tired of listening to me? What's the vibe? What's the situation? Just let me know. Because if you want more, then definitely there's so much more to talk about. And if you want more, also leave other stuff, to talk about that you want responses to. And who knows? Maybe if something's like so egregious and something offends me enough that I'll just, of my own volition be like, no, I'm gonna get on and talk about this. But I'm sweating. I feel pretty sick at this point. This has been going on for too long. Oh, and I haven't even scratched the surface. So frustrating. Okay. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you want another one of these videos? Because I could definitely make one. But if not, then, leave it to your imaginations, I guess. Okay. Oh god, there's so much more to say, but I just really need to stop. So, let me know your thoughts. Goodbye. Oh, god.